Hello everyone, Find Me in LA here. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day so far. If you clicked on this video, chances are you're probably getting ready for Halloween Horror Nights. And what better way to get excited than to talk about years past. In this video in particular, I'm going to be talking about what I think are the most overrated and the most underrated Halloween Horror Nights houses that we've ever had here in Hollywood. Let's not waste any time, let's just get straight into it. Now, right before we get into the nitty-gritty, I do want to make a clarification or two. Once again, these are houses that I think are overrated and underrated, not necessarily like the best ever or the worst ever. So when I call a house overrated, I'm not necessarily calling it bad. I'm just saying that I enjoy it, but not as much as most HHN fans, and vice versa with the underrated houses. So, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about these houses. So I'm going to start off with talking about an overrated one, and then I'm going to follow it up with an underrated, and I'm just going to go back and forth between overrated and underrated. Alright, so the first house I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to take it all the way back to 2015. I know a lot of old school HHN veterans really enjoy this house, and I enjoy it too, but not as much as them. And that house is going to be Crimson Peak from Guillermo del Toro. I see a lot of Horror Nights fans call this like one of the most beautifully designed Horror Nights houses that they've ever made here in Hollywood. And to an extent, I do kind of agree, set design wise. I remember walking through and like the set pieces looking very gorgeous, as to be expected when you're making a maze based off a Guillermo del Toro movie. But I think where this maze falls flat for me are just the scares, mostly. I don't know if that was an intentional choice from Del Toro and Murdy when they were designing it, just prioritizing the aesthetic and like the look of the house over like the actual jump scares. But I don't know, I do think you can have both. You can have a good looking house while still having it be scary. Perfect example of that is my first underrated house, which is Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Now this is the second ever Universal Monsters house, I believe, and it basically is like a loose adaptation of like the movie of the same title. And if you ask me, I personally believe that this is the scariest Universal Monsters house they've ever done. I remember the scares being pretty intense. And of course, like with all the other Universal Monsters houses, the set design is always like top tier. So unlike Crimson Peak, where it was just like top tier set design, it had that and good scares here in Universal Monsters. And I know people had different conversations about like what Universal Monsters house they prefer. Some people think the OG first one is their favorite. Some people like Bride of Frankenstein Lives. Some people like Legends Collide. But I don't really see a whole lot of people bring up Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. This one is extremely slept on, in my personal opinion. Now, another house that I think is overrated is definitely gonna ruffle some feathers. But I think Trick or Treat from 2018 is good. It's just that it's not great in my eyes. I will say the highs of Trick or Treat are extremely high. I think the way they recreated the scenes from the movie, they did like such a phenomenal job with that. I think the characters look like how they were in the movie. The sets looked identical to the ones in the movie. Like everything about the recreations of the movie scenes works so well. My biggest issue, however, are the transitions between set scenes. Because this house is based on an anthology movie, it's divided into different sections. But the way they transition from one section to the next, it feels kind of lazy. It's basically just a bunch of black walls with a couple of blackout scares here and there, and it felt like the black hallways just never ended. They lasted for a good while. Yeah, that's pretty much the big reason why I only mildly enjoy the house as opposed to really enjoying it. Another house I think is underrated is A Quiet Place. Now I remember back in 2024 when this maze was around, I saw everyone do their little rankings, as they do at the end of the year. And I noticed that in a lot of rankings, people put this on their bottom 4. And it completely baffled me because I had this like my number 2. It was my second favorite of that year because I was just so impressed with like the craftsmanship in display here. I thought the technology that they used for the aliens was like next level, and it really paved the way for other houses. Biggest example being Five Nights at Freddy's. And I also thought the human characters were well casted, and like they had to learn American Sign Language just for this house, which I think is just super cool, especially for like representation. A couple of the complaints that I've seen were that the sets were too big, and because the sets were so big that it wasn't really that scary. And I'm thinking to myself, like, imagine complaining about an attraction that's too epic. Like, that to me just doesn't make sense to me, but oh well. Back in 2022, Horror Nights brought us Scarecrow the Reaping. And if you ask me, this is definitely like top 10 Horror Nights mazes of all time for me. Like, I enjoy it that much. So I was pretty excited for it when it came back in 2025. But I think for me, like, it just lost all that magic that the original version had. Okay, let me rephrase that. Some of the magic is still there, and it's mostly because of the scare actors. The scare actors in this version were just as good as they were in the 2022 version. I think just the biggest gripe for me is Slash's music. I am a fan of his work in the Universal Monsters houses, but his style is just so out of place with the Scarecrow theme. And I actually know of some people that prefer this one over the original one, which to me is just like, I mean, I'm not going to yuck your yum, but like, I will never understand why people will prefer this one, especially since Slash's music just like completely distracts me from the whole experience. Michael Myers. Everybody loves Michael Myers. Every time Michael Myers comes to HHN, everybody gets excited. People always say how great his mazes are, especially the ones based on like his first movie and even Halloween 4 as well. But I don't really see a whole lot of people talk about the one based on Halloween 2. I think it's titled Hell Comes to Haddonfield. I think that's the one. The Halloween house that came before this one is the fan favorite. I could be wrong, but I believe it is still to this day the highest guest rated Halloween Horror Nights house in Hollywood's history. And you know, like, well deserved, you know, that was a terrific house. But with this one, I was first experiencing it and I enjoyed it just as much as the first one. I think the scares are top notch. I think the first original Halloween house had like this aggressive, mean tone, whereas this one felt a lot more eerie and a lot more Halloween-y. But the moment this house blew me away and made me prefer it over the original one was the ending, based on the skull pumpkin from the posters. It felt so surreal. It felt like I was in the middle of a nightmare, and I really enjoyed that. Another one that I believe is going to ruffle some feathers is Insidious, specifically the one from 2024. Now, fun fact about yours truly, my number one all-time favorite Halloween Horror Nights maze, still to this day, is Insidious from 2015. It was my very first Insidious maze, and I was just blown away. I was so scared, and I was a big fan of the Insidious movies, still am, and I thought all the movies were adapted really well in this live attraction. Fast forward to 2024, and I did like it on my initial experience, but the more I walked through it, the less and less I enjoyed it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's always so cool to revisit these characters and environments, but I don't know, everything just felt very samey, and I think the scares didn't hit nearly as hard as the previous versions. I don't know if that's because of nostalgia. Yeah, I don't know. Although I do understand why someone might be a fan of this house because it was probably their first Insidious house. The Horrors of the Wyatt 6 was a WWE themed haunted house, and I think because it was WWE themed, it wasn't really all that popular. I remember every single night in 2025, it always had like the shortest wait times, and shame on those who didn't experience this one because this was so much fun. Don't let the WWE theme distract you from the fact that this was a solid, well-made, well-crafted house with excellent scares, a lot of cool, creepy environments, and just has an overall fun heavy metal vibe to it. It was just so awesome. Now, Hollywood is notoriously known for having a bunch of repeats every other year, but the one repeat I am so sick and tired of seeing is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Around 2024, I believe, I think this was the maze that John Murdy announced in Midsummer Scream, and I remember a lot of people were like genuinely excited for this one. They were genuinely looking forward to seeing Leatherface for what feels like the 500th time at Horror Nights, and I just personally didn't see the whole hype because I think, me personally, I do believe there is such a thing as too much Leatherface. Now, I see a lot of people say that this is one of the better Texas Chainsaw houses. Some people say it's the best Texas Chainsaw house. And me personally, I can definitely recognize this as a competently made haunted house. You know, I think the scares are good. The set pieces are pretty gnarly. Like, the whole thing feels very Texas Chainsaw. So if you're a fan of the franchise, I can understand why you like it. But I think for me, it's just like, I've seen this franchise so many times at this event that it was hard for me to get excited at all the crazy Texas Chainsaw stuff. And the last house I'll be talking about for this video is going to be Krampus from 2016. Now, this one I think is definitely the most underrated out of all the ones that I've previously mentioned. Now again, this maze is from 2016, and a lot of fans like myself regard 2016 as one of the best years for Hollywood, if not the best year. I see a lot of people reminisce about the Actress's house and the Freddy vs. Jason house and the Texas Chainsaw house, American Horror Story house, but I don't really see a whole lot of people talk about the Krampus house. In my eyes, this is definitely one of the most beautifully designed houses that they've ever done here in Hollywood, and it just looks so pretty, like the wintry aesthetic mixed with the twisted dark Christmas tone. Like, it just made for like such a fun vibe. The character design here was also really cool. The creatures look just like how they did in the movie. Yeah, the whole house was just super awesome, but sadly it kind of feels like this house just kind of came and went in terms of like, you know, like reception. But nonetheless, Krampus will always have a special place in my heart. And that is where I'm gonna end this video. If you like what you saw, go ahead and click the like button. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and click the subscribe button, especially with Horror Nights right around the corner. Also, let me know down in the comments, what's a Horror Nights maze that you either don't really see the hype for, or you think doesn't get enough love? I'm very curious to see what you guys say. If you stick around to the very end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and until then, see you all in the fog.